Garden Basics with Farmer Fred is brought to you by Smart Pots, the original lightweight, long-lasting fabric plant container. It's made in the USA. Visit smartpots.com/Fred for more information and a special discount. That's smartpots.com/Fred. Welcome to the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred podcast. If you're just a beginning gardener or you want good gardening information, well, you've come to the right spot. There was a survey that asked gardeners coast to coast, what are your favorite homegrown vegetables? So we have a podcast about America's top 10 homegrown vegetables. Actually, we have two podcasts on the topic. There was last week's podcast, episode 263, that covered the first 5 top veggies, including tomatoes, cucumbers, sweet peppers, beans, and carrots. Today, in part 2, master gardener and vegetable expert Gail Pothour and I talk about summer squash, onions, hot peppers, lettuce, and peas, along with growing advice for each one of those, our favorite varieties to grow, and tips for having more backyard success with those vegetables. Plus, we talk about our honorable mentions, backyard garden vegetables that really should be in that top 10 list. It's all in today's episode 264, the top 10 homegrown vegetables, part 2. We're podcasting from Barking Dog Studios here in the beautiful Abutilon Jungle in Suburban Purgatory. It's the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred podcast, brought to you today by Smart Pots and Dave Wilson Nursery. Let's go. Last week on this Garden Basics podcast, you may recall we were talking about the top 10 garden vegetables grown at home. Gail Pothour was with us, and we went through tomatoes, cucumbers, sweet peppers, beans, and carrots, and we ran out of time. So this week, we're on to part 2 of the top 10 most popular garden vegetables to grow. It includes summer squash, onions, hot peppers, lettuce, and peas. That according to the National Garden Association and the Rapid City, South Dakota Journal newspaper. Gail, let's get going on 6 through 10.
Yes, let's do that.
Moving on to number 6 in the most popular garden vegetables to plant at home. I laugh because, well, who hasn't had way too many zucchini? Summer squash. And zucchini is just one form of summer squash. There's all sorts of summer squashes.
Oh, yeah. In fact, some of my favorites, my favorite heirloom zucchini, another heirloom, is I'm interested more in heirlooms for tomatoes for the flavors, but there are some other crops that have heirlooms that are really good. It's called Ortolani di Faenza. I don't know how to say it in Italian, but it's a light green zucchini instead of that dark black green that a typical zucchini has. Real prolific, and so I grow that every year. And then there's yellow crookneck, or there's the scallop or the patty pan. So there's a lot of different ones. I love butterbelly. That happens to be a hybrid yellow crookneck. And I grew it up a pallet last year. It's a bush variety, but I wanted to get it up off the ground, so I propped up a pallet and grew it up the pallet. And it saved space, and it was easier to pick, and it was an outstanding variety. It was new for me last year. Zephyr's always a good one. It's a yellow crookneck with green at the bottom, kind of a light green color. And then my favorite scallop is Sunburst. It's a yellow patty pan with a green button on the bottom, and that happens to be an All-America Selection winner.
Among the scallops that are recommended by UC Davis, and these are varieties that you'd probably find at your local nursery if you wanted to plant them from transplants, but they're really best planted from seed. But refer back to our story of why you don't want to cram the roots
like cucumbers, they don't want their roots disturbed.
Yeah, that's why it really is much easier from seed on summer squash. But Peter Pan hybrid, Sunburst, Scallopini, early white bush are the scallops recommendations. Among the yellow summer squashes, they like early prolific straight neck, Sundance, early golden summer crookneck, Dixie. And among the zucchini, Aristocrat, Grazini, Ambassador, Gold Rush, and Burpee Ford Hook. I think a lot of the problems that people have with summer squash is, well, first of all, they're doing the right thing by planting from seed. And usually the recommendations from planting by seed say mound the soil up about 8 inches tall and about 12 inches wide, sort of like a plateau of really enriched soil, maybe mix some manure in there. And then in that plateau that is 12 inches across, put 6 seeds in a circle and then wait. And then
you don't thin them? No?
Well, you feel, look, it's growing. I don't want to take that out. No. Oh, you better. Honestly, if you have, let's say, 2 mounds of zucchini seed planted and you've got 6 seeds in each and you want a normal sized garden and you don't want too much zucchini, thin it out to 1 per hill. Mm-hmm. Good luck on that.
Yeah. I am sort of hesitant in that I'm going to grow 2 different squash this year. Generally, I do 1. That's plenty for me and my husband. But I'm going to do my favorite zucchini and the yellow crookneck, the butterbelly. I'm going to do 2 different plants, and I'm thinking I might be crazy because that's probably twice as much squash as I need. I've already been collecting recipes on what to do with all that squash.
Good idea.
But it's very prolific. And if you keep harvesting them when they're small, that will keep them producing. If you want to stop the production, let them grow to a baseball bat, and that'll slow them down a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Ideally, for best flavor, they're best harvested when they're 8 inches or less.
Right.
Yeah.
They'll get too seedy otherwise, when they're starting to get over mature and they'll get real seedy inside. So, yeah.
A lot of people they plant the seeds, the zucchini seeds or the squash seeds in May, and by June they are complaining, look at the fruit that's coming out. It's stunted, it's short, it doesn't look right. What's going on? It's usually incomplete pollination because of the fact that they have separate male and female flowers, and they don't produce male and female flowers necessarily on the same day if it's too hot or too cold. And, the bees sometimes don't help out very much, but usually it's that incomplete pollination. But if you're just patient, if you just wait, you'll get normal size zucchini that the weather will even out, and you will have more zucchini than you know what to do with.
Exactly. Yeah, and generally the male flowers start out first.
Right.
And so you'll have all these flowers and you think, I have no fruit. Well, the female flower will have a little immature fruit at the base of it. And so you can tell the difference. And the males start first, then the females, when they need to get in sync with each other in the morning, because generally they're viable in the morning. And it takes a while, and the weather can disrupt that. So, yeah, you just got to be patient.
As the University of California, Davis says, under good growing conditions, fruits are ready for first harvest 50 to 65 days after seeds are planted. And in the world of summer vegetables, that's pretty darn quick.
It is quick, yes.
Moving on in our list of the 10 most popular garden vegetables to grow at home, number 7 is onions. And onions, Gail, take patience.
Oh, absolutely. And I find growing bulbing onions, the typical big onion, to kind of be a challenge. So I rarely grow onions in my own garden. If I do grow them, I'm going to grow one variety, and it's called Stockton Red. And it's getting a little more difficult to find seeds for Stockton Red, but that's one that I really like. But onions are day length sensitive. So you need to grow a type of onion, whether it's long day, short day, intermediate day, or day neutral, depending on your latitude. I think that's where a lot of people have problems. They are growing a variety that maybe isn't suited for their latitude, and so they either bolt prematurely or they don't bulb at all. So with Sacramento being in about a 38-degree latitude, we're intermediate day, so choose varieties that say they're intermediate day or that are day neutral. Day neutral means it doesn't matter. Anybody can grow them. So that's kind of the key. And where I've run into problems, if I buy sets or something, they don't necessarily tell you if they're long day, short day, intermediate day, whatever. And so I'm buying the wrong variety. Stockton Reds I know will do well here, so that's an intermediate day. But onions can be a challenge. And so let's just say I don't grow them that often. I'll grow green onions, or I'm currently growing Egyptian walking onions, but bulbing onions I don't do too often.
Generally, onions are planted in late summer, early fall here in USDA Zone 9's September, October, and aren't harvested until June or July if you're going for the bulbing onions. Now, green onions are a different story. Green onions or scallions, you can grow those year-round here. Varieties like Evergreen White, Southport White, White Sweet Spanish, White Lisbon, Tokyo Long White, which I planted for the first time this year. And if you use a lot of green onions in your recipe preparations, always have a pot of onions growing.
That's what I found, that green onions are something that I use more. I use regular onions a lot too, but I use a lot of green onions. And so those are easy to grow. I can grow them in a container. I can grow them practically any time of the year. If it's too hot, I can move them into the shade. So yeah, that's a good one to grow.
Yeah, unfortunately, by the time they are ready to harvest, it's not like you can take the onions out and plant something else. Actually, you could. When the onions are harvested, if you reinvigorate the soil, you could probably put in zucchini or another summer squash or a winter squash.
Or set that space aside for planting your fall crop, because some of those can go in August or September. They like to have warm soil to germinate, but they don't necessarily like to have, they need cool climate to mature. So a lot of our cool season crops we would start growing when the soil is still warm, but we want them to mature when it's cooler out. So once you took those onions out, you could then plant something for the fall.
Among the onion bulbing varieties recommended by the University of California, Davis's Vegetable Research and Information Center are Grano, Green-X, California Early Red, Fiesta, Yellow Sweet Spanish, White Sweet Spanish, Southport White Globe, Southport Red Globe, and the Stockton Yellow Globe.
No Stockton Red in there, huh? We actually did an onion variety trial almost 10 years ago at the Fair Oaks Horticulture Center, where we grew several varieties of long day, intermediate day, and short day to see how they would do in our climate. And all the long day bolted, and some of the short day did as well. But that's what's critical, is to grow the right type. And what I mean by long day, intermediate day, and short day is, if you look at a map and you see your latitude, long day are going to be up north. So they need 14 to 16 hours of daylight in order for the bulbing to start. Intermediate day is 12 to 14 hours. Short day is 10 to 12 hours. That's down south. So it does have a lot to do with your latitude.
Yeah, exactly. If you live in Edmonton, you can grow long day onions.
And we did grow them here, and we found they don't do that well.
Yeah,
so it doesn't work.
I am not surprised on that. I'm pretty picky about who I allow to advertise on this podcast. My criteria, though, is pretty simple. It has to be a product I like, a product I use, and a product I would buy again. And you know who checks all those boxes? It's Smart Pots. Smart Pots is the oldest and still the best of all the fabric plant containers that you might find. Smart Pots are sold around the world, and they're proudly made 100% right here in the USA. Smart Pots come in a wide array of sizes and colors and can be reused year after year. Some models even have handles, and that makes them a lot easier to move around the yard. Because the fabric breathes, Smart Pots are better suited than plastic pots, especially for hot climates. That breathable fabric has other benefits too. Water drainage issues? Not with Smart Pots. Roots that go round and round, choking the root ball like they do in plastic pots? Doesn't happen with Smart Pots. These benefits will help you get a bigger, better plant than what you've gotten in the past with the same size plastic or other hard container. Smart Pots are available at independent garden centers as well as select Ace and True Value hardware stores nationwide. To find a store near you or to buy online, visit smartpots.com/Fred. And don't forget that /Fred part. On that page are details about how, for a limited time, you can get 10% off your Smart Pot order by using the coupon code FRED, F-R-E-D. Use it at checkout from the Smart Pot store. Visit smartpots.com/Fred for more information about the complete line of Smart Pots lightweight, colorful, award-winning fabric containers. And don't forget that special Farmer Fred 10% discount, Smart Pots, the original award-winning fabric planter. Go to smartpots.com/Fred. Well, here at Barking Dog Studios, we are running through the top 10 list of the most popular garden vegetables to grow. We now come to number 8 on our list, and it's time for the hot peppers to shine. Hot peppers, the 8th most popular home garden vegetable to grow. 31% of gardeners across the United States say they grow hot peppers, and they range from mildly spicy to thermonuclear. There's all kinds of varieties to suit many tastes and degrees of heat tolerance. There are some mildly warm ones that I like to grow, like Numex Joey Parker. That doesn't offend my taste buds too much. But for those that like it hot, really, really, really hot, you can grow those ghost peppers, the Butchalokias, the Charlestons, and the others. But there's a lot of good, tasty warm peppers too, like Anaheim, for example, or even some of the jalapenos.
Yeah, I'm just shaking my head. I don't eat chilies. I can't tolerate that heat. So one of the hot peppers that I grow is called Tricked You. It's a heatless jalapeno. So it's not classified as a sweet pepper, but it's a heatless jalapeno, and I grow that every year. And it's a hybrid that does great and huge yields. I like the flavor of the jalapeno without the heat, and that's what you get. My husband, on the other hand, likes hot peppers, and so every year I grow a little hanging basket of jalapeno. It's a little miniature jalapeno. It's an All-America Selection winner. The fruits are only 1 to 2 inches long, and so I satisfy his heat requirement with those. But that's a good one to grow in a container. I could grow it in a hanging basket like we do, and we also do it at the Horticulture Center in a hanging basket or a small container. It's very prolific for something that size.
I grew one last year called Nadapeño, and it looks like a jalapeno, but nada. It's not hot at all, and it was actually very tasty. I couldn't convince my wife though to cook with it because she was convinced it was a hot pepper, and she wouldn't take a bite of it because she won't fall for that trick again.
That's right.
And so I would eat it in front of her. Look, it's not hot. See, am I running for water? No, I'm not. But Nadapeño is actually it looks like a jalapeno, but there is very little heat associated with it. We mentioned some of the varieties that are popular that are fairly mild in their heat. The Anaheim, for example, the Hungarian yellow wax, which is moderately hot. That isn't too bad. And among the heirlooms, as I mentioned, Numex Joey Parker is one of my favorites with a wonderful flavor, too. The problem with a lot of hot peppers is the heat overwhelms the flavor. You miss the flavor.
Well, that's why I like the Tricked You jalapeno, because I can actually taste the jalapeno, and I like the flavor of it. It's the heat just kind of overpowers. So, yeah, I'll leave the hot peppers to other people.
There's another pepper out there called shishito. You talk to some people, they'll say, oh, it's a sweet pepper. You talk to others, they'll say, oh, it's a hot pepper. I've grown shishito. I grew them for 3 years in a row because I couldn't figure out why 9 out of 10 of the peppers at any one time that had ripened on the plant would be mild, but there was one that was hot. And it just made.
And you never knew which one was hot.
No, they all looked the same. And it wasn't a case of it had changed color or anything like that. So the shishito, I think, is a tricky pepper. If you want to play Russian roulette with your mouth, get the shishito.
I actually did try it one year. Someone convinced me to try it. They said they're so good you pan fry them, and they're great. So I did grow them, and I did hear that, occasionally you'll get a hot one. Well, every one I had was hot. And I read somewhere where they say you have to be sure to pick them when they're small. If they start getting larger, they'll all be hot. So I've not tried them since, but.
Well, that's a good tip to have. All right. Now we come to number 9 on the list of the 10 most popular garden vegetables. And it's a cool season crop in California. If you live in a very mild climate or the Bay Area of California, you can certainly grow all the lettuce varieties you want. Lettuce. And I can see why people grow lettuce. And I hope that you try something different than iceberg. Iceberg, to me, is the most nutritionless, tasteless lettuce that has fallen into mass marketing because there's a lot of leaf lettuce varieties that are so much tastier and also can withstand heat better than iceberg.
Yeah, I was going to say iceberg doesn't do that well in the Sacramento area. We're too hot. And so we generally recommend try a loose leaf or a romaine or one of the butterhead types. But if you have to have an iceberg, pick that up at the store. Don't try growing it. It won't do that well here.
Yeah, it's a waste of space, as a matter of fact. Now, I have been on a lifelong gardener search for a lettuce variety, a loose leaf lettuce variety that can take the heat. Some are better than others as far as getting maybe through July, but it seems like when July turns into August, they all start bolting.
Right. And actually, several years ago, we did an experiment 2 years in a row at the Horticulture Center because we get this question a lot. Why can't I grow lettuce in the summer? So we thought, okay, let's find some varieties, grow them through the heat of summer and see how they do. First off, you need to start with some varieties that are heat resistant, like Jericho. That was bred in Israel, so it's a little more heat resistant. And we tried, half dozen or so different varieties. We monitored when we planted them, how many weeks it was before they started bolting. Some did better than others. Some did pretty well. But what we found is you need to mulch heavily to keep the moisture in, keep them well watered, provide shade during their entire lifespan in the summer, and then be prepared as soon as one starts to bolt, take it out, and then replant with another transplant. So kind of a succession planting. It is possible, but it's a lot of work. I say it takes a lot of water and shading and monitoring. I'm not sure if it's worth it. Or grow it in the shade if you have a shady location. But often it's not just the sunlight, it's the heat. And even in the shade in Sacramento, we can be fairly warm in the summertime. So it's a tough thing to do.
The closest green I've found that can be grown year-round, and especially if you do it in the shade, it does okay here, and that's Swiss chard.
Right. Yeah, that can be grown year-round. I have done it in an area of my yard where it got some afternoon shade in the summertime, and it was able to over summer. But yeah, any of the other leafy greens are going to be a little tough. One of my favorites, absolute favorite lettuce is called Pomegranate Crunch. It's a red romaine, and it is very good. I get it as pelleted seeds, which makes it a little bit easier to germinate. Lettuce can have a difficult time germinating. Lettuce does need light in order to germinate, so don't plant the seed too deeply. Pelleted seeds don't have that problem. But I think if sometimes people have difficulty getting lettuce to germinate because maybe they buried it too far. It needs light. It's one of the few vegetables that needs light to germinate.
And I believe it's one of those seeds that will not germinate in heat, period.
Right. If you tried sowing lettuce seed in the summer, maybe for a fall crop, if your soil temperature is too warm, the lettuce seed can go dormant. So if you're also starting it indoors, whereas I use a heating mat to get a lot of my seeds to germinate, you don't use a heating mat for lettuce because the soil will be too warm and lettuce seeds will go dormant in heat.
Some of the varieties that have been recommended as heat-tolerant lettuces that I've grown over the years, and they're barely heat tolerant, are black-seeded Simpson and deer tongue. They're pretty good, but like I said, they do eventually bolt. But if you're looking for first of all, I think one good rule to remember is if you want lettuce to last in the yard as long as possible, grow loose leaf varieties, not head lettuce.
Right. And of the ones that we did in our heat tolerant trial, the ones that did well, besides Jericho, was year-round bronze. It's an oak leaf. And it was late to bolt in the summer, so it actually did very well. Red Cross is a red butterhead. Merlot, a dark red leaf lettuce. And a Paraday, a red oak leaf. That's one of my favorites, but I can no longer find seeds for it. And then Nevada, it's a green loose leaf, kind of a semi-heading type. So all those did well as could be expected in our summer heat. So they did better than a lot of other varieties.
I'm glad you mentioned Nevada because I have grown that one before, and it was pretty good. But I think if you want a dependable green, do the Swiss chard.
Right, I agree.
All right. you thinking of growing fruit trees? Maybe you already are, but you'll want to know more about them. Well, you probably have a million questions, like which fruit trees will grow where I live? What are the tastiest fruits? When's harvest time? How do I care for these trees? The good news is the answers are all nearby. Just go to davewilson.com, click on the Home Garden tab at the top of the page. And in that Home Garden tab, you're going to find a link to their fruit and nut harvest chart so you can be picking delicious, healthy fruits from your own yard for a long growing season. Here in USDA Zone 9, that could be May through December. And you're just a click away with the informative YouTube video series at davewilson.com. As part of that video series, they'll walk you through the simple process of using the Dave Wilson website to find their trees either at a nearby local nursery or at a mail order source. That's Dave Wilson Nursery, the nation's largest grower of fruit trees for the backyard garden. They've got planting tips, taste test results, and information about their revolutionary backyard orchard culture techniques. That'll explain how you can have a cornucopia of different fruit trees in a small backyard. Your harvest to better health begins at davewilson.com. Well, let's wrap this up with the number 10 most popular garden vegetable grown according to the National Garden Association and the Rapid City Journal, the Rapid City, South Dakota Journal newspaper. It's peas. I think of peas. I mean, I'm looking out my window here and through the Abutilon Jungle and looking at what I have growing in barrels, and I've got some Oregon sugar pod peas on their last legs.
Yeah, it's getting toward the end of their life here, especially since I think we just hit our first 85 degrees or something after having so much rain and coolness. So peas are going to start struggling. I don't grow a lot of peas at home, but we grow them at the Horticulture Center. And there's a new one that we're growing. It's an All-America Selection winner called Snack Hero. It's a relatively new winner. And it was amazing. It looks like a green bean. So it's more cylindrical, long and slender like a green bean is, and about 4 inches long. And it was so tasty. We were snacking on them raw at our workday the other day. They're really good. It's not a tall plant, maybe a couple feet tall. So we have it growing up an old umbrella frame that we have collapsed down to make like a pyramid. And then we ran some strings up it. So it's growing on that. But it was an exceptional variety. Very tasty, not woody or stringy at all. So really sweet, called Snack Hero.
When did you plant that?
Well, they planted them when I was out of town. So it's probably in October, maybe.
Okay, so there was a cool season pea.
Right.
All right.
Yeah, and then we have another variety of snap pea growing up an umbrella frame that we've opened up. And then run strings. You can run strings up or some kind of a mesh for them to grow up. So a lot of peas are vining type, and so they need some kind of support. So that's one way to use up your old umbrella that the canvas is torn, grow them up an umbrella frame.
All right. So there you go. The 10 most popular garden vegetables, from tomatoes to cucumbers, sweet peppers, beans, carrots, summer squash, onions, hot peppers, lettuce, and peas. By the way, with peas, do you soak the seeds before you plant them?
I don't know if we soak them or not since I wasn't here. You can. That's a good way to get them to germinate is soak them overnight. I've heard. I don't know if they need to be soaked that long. Usually
6 hours or so is plenty of lukewarm water.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah. Now, you had mentioned before we started that you were disappointed that melons didn't make the top 10 list. I'm disappointed beets didn't make the top 10 list.
Yeah, I'm surprised at that as well. I thought beets would be on it depends on the list. I've seen several top 10 lists, and I've had potatoes on them, different things. So it just depends on which list you're looking at. But if I had to pick between only two things to grow, it'd be tomatoes and melons, I think.
Okay. And what I like about beets, this reminds me of something my Uncle Hubert used to say back on the family farm in Beach, North Dakota. And when he raised pigs, and he said, we use all parts of the pig except the oink. And beets are like that because the entire plant is edible.
Oh, yeah. I can do beets as microgreens.
Yeah.
So you eat the tops all the time.
And the leaves this time of year are lush and make great salad material.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay, well, my favorite melon is a muskmelon, what we call cantaloupes here in the U.S., is Sarah's Choice and one called Divergent. And I think those are my two favorites now. They're just so sweet and, they're wonderful. So I'm growing them this year, as always.
My favorite beet variety to grow, because it reminds me of something psychedelic, is the Chioggia beet that has that concentric red ring throughout the entire middle.
Mm-hmm, like a bullseye, yeah.
Yeah, and it's delicious, too.
Yeah, I'm not a big beet fan, but I've learned to eat them. But if I grow them, I like to do the golden beets. They're not as beety, I guess that's a word. So they're a little milder. But if I'm growing microgreens for the tops, I do bull's blood.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, it's real good.
And
good tops.
And do you wear an apron during all this?
You have to, because you get that red all over you, you know.
Gail Pothour, we have offered people a short, sweet education on growing home vegetables, and I hope more people try it this year.
We have, and it was fun. I enjoyed it.
How many of you directly feed your plants, both indoor and outdoor plants, with human foods such as milk, sugar, coffee grounds, eggshells, and more? Are you doing your plants any good? Now, composting food scraps so that they break down into the basic elements, that's a different story. I'm talking about pouring milk or Gatorade directly around your plants or topping the soil with coffee grounds. In today's Beyond the Garden Basics newsletter, we talk with Robert Pavlis. He's the author of the GardenMyths.com website. He explains what happens to your plants and your soil when you do that. And it's not necessarily a good thing. And he also talks about what he feeds his in-ground plants. And by the way, it isn't commercial fertilizers. For current newsletter subscribers, look for the issue entitled, Can Human Food Also Be Plant Food? If you're already a subscriber, it's probably in your email waiting for you now. Or you can start a subscription. It's free. Find the link to the Beyond the Garden Basics newsletter in today's show notes or at Substack. And you can sign up at the newsletter link at our homepage, gardenbasics.net. On next week's Garden Basics podcast, that'll be episode 265, we talk with organic gardening educator and consultant Steve Zien about irrigation basics, especially when to water your garden and how to figure that out. And a big part of watering your garden effectively is having soil that has the right mix of soil, air, and water for your plant roots to live in and thrive in. You want soil that drains well, but yet retain moisture for a longer period of time. Now, that may sound like a contradiction, but it is achievable. Right now, Steve explains how the addition of compost and mulch to your garden beds can help you achieve that goal. What are some of the benefits of mulching and composting for the soil?
Compost and mulch should be just placed on the surface. You should not till it in. When you till in the soil, you're killing a lot of the soil biology, killing the worms. You're destroying the soil structure, which is the different sized pore spaces. It ends up compacting the soil. So you put mulch, worm castings, compost just right on the soil surface. The rains, the irrigation, and the soil biology, in particular worms will come up to the soil surface every night, feed on that material, and then go back down into the soil, acting as Mother Nature's rototiller. And it's that organic material that improves the quality of your soil, makes it more like a sponge, and it helps hold the nutrients and hold the moisture. And it's the food source. It's the energy source for the soil biology. And the soil biology is what makes your soil function. It creates those large pore spaces when it's creating soil structure so that the roots can grow easily, so that you can, transplant easily. So the soil biology can move, so the nutrients and water can move. So you need that food for the soil biology, and you don't have to till it in. You just put it on the soil surface, but you do want to keep it a little bit away from the stems of your plants. Your plants are not adapted to having wet, moist conditions, which is what you will have in that mulch or compost layer on the soil surface. If that's up against the stem of your plant, it can start to cause rotting conditions. The base of your plant will rot and die, and your plant will fall over.
Which back east is called a mulch volcano. And so
yes.
you want to just lightly scrape away all those ingredients away from the trunks of your plants, only by an inch or so, to just give them a chance to breathe. Now, on my raised beds, I have a more complicated formula for making my own soil lasagna here. Is at the end of the season, I will cut off my tomato plants and pepper plants and zucchini plants at the soil level. And I'll chop that up and feed it to the worms. Then I leave the roots of those plants in the soil. Then I'll take a thin layer of worm castings and spread that over the entire bed. And I'll rake it in lightly, just with a metal rake, just lightly rake it in. And then I'll throw an inch or two of compost on top of that. And then on top of that, the ground up oak leaves from my neighbors. 3 to 4 inches deep. So you basically have sort of like a thick mulch layer that will slowly break down during the winter, be washed into the soil with the winter rains, and then come spring, you start digging in your soil, you go, wow, this is great soil. Look at the worms. Look at them. They're smiling. It works. It really does.
You can say, I'm going to start, it can be fall. And you're saying, well, I want to have a vegetable garden next year. You do that in what you just said in fall. Your soil could be really, really hard and really nasty. And you think, I'm never going to be able to garden in there. And you do what you just said. People will be amazed at how nice that soil will be come spring.
Oh, and it's just a joy to dig in. I mean, if you're trying to dig a deep hole to bury a tomato plant that's brand new and bury up some of those leaves, it just digs so easy. It's just so nice. And the reason for keeping those old root systems in for last year's summer vegetables is, well, they're going to break down in the soil and they're going to provide even more nutrients for the soil biology.
Not only do they do that, but the space in your soil where those roots were, as they decompose, they're going to shrivel up and basically almost disappear volume-wise. And then you will have nice channels for water, air, nutrients, roots to move through your soil.
Yeah, it's really not as much work as you think. As I've been telling people for years and years, if you have this hankering to spend $1,000 on a rototiller, don't. Spend it on a chipper shredder. You can find them for less as well. That chipper shredder is going to make garden gold for you.
Exactly. Yeah, we really don't want to till the soil. There's really no reason to till the soil. The only time you should work the soil is when you're transplanting. And just put all the compost, put all the fertilizer, put all of the soil amendments right on the soil surface. Have you ever gone out in the forest or out in the prairie and see Mother Nature tilling? She doesn't do it.
No. She doesn't rake leaves either.
Yeah. Why do they call them leaves? Because you're supposed to leave them
when
they fall on the ground.
Yes, indeed. There you go. And if memory serves me correctly, you have a class coming up on mulching and composting.
Yeah, mulching and composting. The class I've got coming up is Thursday, May 11th. From noon to 1 Pacific Daylight Time. It's called Colossal Compost, Miraculous Mulch, and Spectacular Soil. You're right. I think compost, I would add worm castings to that because that's basically worm compost. And mulch, they're the energy source, the food source for the soil biology that makes the nutrients available and basically feeds the plants. To sign up for this class, go to chwd.org/community/pound classes.
Whoa, wait a minute. Community/pound, like the pound sign?
Yes.
Okay, pound sign, then what?
Classes.
I'll have that link in today's show notes, folks. Okay, chwd.org/community/pound sign, and the word classes. Like I said, we'll have the link in today's show notes. Now, that is a live Zoomer on Thursday, May 11th. What was the time again?
Noon to 1, and it's free.
Noon to 1 Pacific time.
Pacific time, and that will be posted on their website, the same website, a couple of weeks after the class.
All right, so we'll be up there for everybody to enjoy after the fact.
Exactly.
All right. So again, it's Steve talking composting, mulching, and he ought to know. I won't say he invented it, but he gets the word out, and more people are doing it and having more and more success with their gardens here in Northern California with the Citrus Heights Water District, I guess it is.
Yes, it is.
All right. chwd.org/community/classes. And you'll see the link. All right. Steve Zien, thanks so much.
It's been fun as always, Fred.
Quit fertilizing your plants. Feed your soil instead. That was the topic way back in May of 2020, back in episode 7 of the Garden Basics podcast, which, by the way, is a very popular episode that goes deep into what makes for a successful plant. And that's today's flashback episode of the week. If you think plant roots are sucking up that liquid or granular fertilizer that you're pouring on them, well, think again. Plant roots aren't straws. Instead, there are billions of microscopic beneficial fungi and bacteria in the soil that are converting those fertilizers into a usable form for the plant and delivering the finished product to the plant roots. The better you treat those beneficial critters, you're going to have healthier plants. It's all about the soil. Back in episode 7, we talked with Giselle Schoninger of Kellogg Garden Products about how this process works and actually how easy it is to improve your soil and your plants. Also in episode 7, we talked about why you should spend your money on a chipper shredder instead of a rototiller and how that rototiller could actually damage your soil. Are your winter greens and cool season vegetables like broccoli and cauliflower starting to bolt? They're turning bitter, maybe becoming uneatable? America's favorite retired college horticultural professor, Debbie Flower, explains why that happens. But there's a very beneficial side to all that bolting, a result that can actually reduce your garden pest problems. It's all in our flashback episode of the week, number 7, Feed Your Soil, Not Your Plants. It's from May of 2020. Go to your favorite podcast outlet, do a search for episode 7 of the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred podcast. Once again, it's entitled Feed Your Soil, Not Your Plants. You can also find the podcast as well as a transcript at our homepage, gardenbasics.net. The Garden Basics with Farmer Fred podcast comes out once a week on Fridays. Plus, the newsletter podcast that comes with the Beyond the Garden Basics newsletter continues, and that will also be released on Fridays. Both are free, and they're brought to you by Smart Pots and Dave Wilson Nursery. The Garden Basics podcast is available wherever podcasts are handed out, and that includes our homepage, gardenbasics.net. And that's where you can also sign up for the Beyond the Garden Basics newsletter and podcast. That's gardenbasics.net, or you can use the links in today's show notes. And thank you so much for listening.